Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I am your no shorty. It's going to be a quiet week for reviews for this one after last week's bumper crop, but we are going to do some anyway. We start with Vatican City. And yeah, it's a Mark Millar comic book, and I feel like that's usually a lot more relevant than it is this time. I quite like reading Mark Millar comic books. He's not really knocked much out of the park in terms of like absolute must-see barnstormer for a while for me now. But I always find him interesting, and I apologise, I will get round to like why this individual comic book is good, but if I've got the chance to talk about Mark Millar just being an oddity, I will. He has a tendency to wear his politics on his sleeve, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a weird thing. I'm not entirely sure where he sits, or if he sits anywhere other than a fence. And it could be interesting, you know, we have like the terrible sexual assault stuff going on in Kick-Ass 2, his unconscionably large number of abortion references he puts in comic books, but then also how kind of just heartwarming Hook was, and how King of Spies was like full-on anti-establishment, anti-capitalist kind of thing. It's interesting, to say the least. This particular one, I thought this could be interesting. It's something set in the Vatican City, and that's pretty much all I knew about it when I picked it up. And it turns out its relevance to the Vatican City is kind of just an interesting little plot point so far. I think it's going to spin out into some more interesting things. I absolutely think that for all the unanswered stuff that happens in this issue, we're going to get those answers. It's kind of setting them up in a certain way. Not in any way that makes me sure of what these answers are going to be, which I'd like, but there's foreshadowing there. There's enough that makes me think, yeah, they're left unanswered for a reason. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of plot for this one. Nothing that's really spoilery, but if you do want to go in clean, feel free to stop this review right now and go read the comic book. It's a vampire story, this one, and it shouldn't be like a huge surprise. I think like in the promotional material, I'm fairly sure vampires are mentioned at some point, but I never read any of the promotional material. I just picked this comic book, kind of see what was going on with it. And it's a story of vampires taking over the world, but not in the way I'm used to seeing, which I quite like, because that in itself asks some questions. I've read or engaged with some media which has this idea of vampires taking the world, but they always do it in a very specific way, which is putting their people in positions of power at the top end of society. Venture capitalists, government, royalty, all that kind of stuff. So then they can take control from the top down, which is kind of how you expect things to work. In this one, it's more a one night of horror, going around and just murdering a whole bunch of people, so everyone is terrified of them. And this is a different way of doing it. It makes it hard to see how they could maintain order in all the chaos that they've created themselves. But again, I feel like this is something which, if it doesn't get answered, is kind of sloppy writing. In the same way that, for this to happen, there would need to have been a whole bunch of vampires that nobody knew about. And it's clear this is not a world where people are aware of vampires, even on the periphery. Like, it seems a surprise, and people literally see them being vampires. Like, no, vampires aren't real. So for as mainly what it would take to do this kind of thing, to have this kind of organisation, but nobody knew about it, and they still did it in a night of chaos rather than top-down control, again, just unanswered questions, but I do feel like they're going to get answered. Other main plot point is the main character, a guy called Guido, who used to be a pilot but wants to be a member of the Swiss Guard. And now, I could tell you about some Swiss Guard stuff. Due to me being a tabletop role player and having a few people interested in such things, I went on a bit of a wiki dive into the Swiss Guard some time ago. I don't have time to tell you why they're freaking cool right now, but go check them out. If nothing else, it's an interesting little look at history and contemporary activities, and how they kind of mingle together and how weird it is. Go look into it. This guy wants to join, and in a little meeting to discuss why he's joining, he pretty much tells you who he is. I don't really mind it in like an issue 1 when you're just laying out who these characters are, having a character in the story ask another character a question and that one being about them. That's fine. It's not like the most inventive way of showing characters. It's very much telling instead. And I don't mind it because it makes sense within the story he's telling. It makes sense for the characters to have this conversation. But what's odd is then we get like really good examples of him showing who he is. All the stuff he very much said out loud early on, he then just gives great examples for, and it makes me wonder why they had that moment where he just tells the audience as well what's going on. Frustratingly, I think it's a Netflix thing. One of the big conversations about Netflix at the moment is the fact that they have their characters literally talk out loud about what's going on, so people who are also on their phones can follow along with what's happening. Usually not something I'd really feel worth commenting on, but Mark Millar has an exclusive Netflix deal. For all of his stuff, they get first refusal. So there's that. But it's still fine. There's a lot of cool action adventure, and it is a good-looking comic book. Per Berg does a really good job. It's all digital art, but it actually works really quite nicely. It gives the opportunity to do some far more interesting things with colours than a traditional artist would do, and he uses the ability quite effectively. He has nighttime scenes that look fantastic. The action is fantastic as well. I feel the thing that let him down is some of the detailing on individual characters is a little bit flat. Same with some of the colouring. But overall, looks great, and I'm vaguely interested to see where all these unanswered questions are going, so I'm probably going to at least check out the next issue. That's it for me for now, though. Until I see you all again, look after you, everyone. Stay safe. Bye!